where he committed to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. And we look at that with great pride now. But it reminds me that oftentimes politicians will make a promise and make a commitment with no apparent way to make it happen, and then point to somebody else and tell them, you make it happen. And that, of course, is what happened in 1961. When we were committing to put a man on the moon, we had to invent everything about how to get there. And the people that I'm about to introduce, I'm going to be presenting each of them with a citation today from the state of New York, commemorating them for the role that they played in helping us to land a man on the moon, the achievement that we are celebrating today. So it's my pleasure to get the opportunity to meet all of you gentlemen today, and I'm going to introduce each of you one at a time. I do have, as I say, a citation from the state of New York in honor of your achievement and commitment to the program. The first person I'm going to introduce is Raymond LeCan. He will be the moderator today for the roundtable. He is a former Grumman Vice President and Director of the Lunar Module Data Reduction System, LDRS. Basically the guy who made sure that all the equipment worked before sending the astronauts into space. Raymond LeCan. Panelist is Leon Gorinsky, a rocket scientist who worked on the LEM propulsion systems. Next is John Lawrence Larry Jungler, the engineer responsible for testing, maintenance, and integration of the communication subsystem with all the other systems on the LEM, including the intercommunication system, TV, and biomedical systems. Our next panelist is Anthony Moscola, the cockpit design leader. Responsibilities included fireproofing the cockpit in suits, who worked with the astronauts and met Joseph Gavin and Werner von Braun. Anthony? And finally, it's my pleasure to introduce our final panelist today, Edward Whitman. Who apparently brought his own fan club. He is an engineer who worked on communications between the LEM and the command service module. Edward?
This shows you, this, by the way, is a model that was made by Leon. It was made for the chap that I just told you was the guy who caused all the trouble at Grumman. Because he was such a sharp support guy. You know, he was the man who went around calling all the engineers knuckleheads. Because he was so close to the shop, they did things like this. And Leon, you made this out of what?
I made that out of the LEM 1 propellant tank that came down to Columbia, South America, that some Air Force pilot saw and noted it. And it was given to me to make a retirement gift to George Titterton. And it was petrified, because it originally was titanium. And I had a problem trying to cut through it. And one guy down in the shop in Plant 5, I don't remember his name, he came up with a $2 sword that he got from the Times. Now they used to put little gimmicks on the Times. And he was able to cut through it and make that silhouette for me. And then I had silk screen so that it would look like a lunar module. And underneath the base, which was mahogany, I put an electroluminescent light that we utilized for all the lighting in the cockpit area.
Great, thank you. Okay, by the way, this is a protective device for the telescope, the lunar module. that was again made by Leon. And it was done at the request of an astronaut. It was done at the request of an astronaut. So guess what? This is another reason why the LEM was garbage. I'm missing a slide, but that's okay. Okay, now here's the backlit panel, again by Leon. And the reason I have these is because Leon kept pictures. Our other gentleman, he came in to see me with a bag with 100 or so slides in it.
Not Leon.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay? And I just put this in for fun. This is Grumman's first computer. I bought it for, I think, $7,000 or $8,000, and it managed to make a huge difference in flight testing. It saved lives, and that was the reason that I ended up being able to buy the supercomputer for the LEM. And that's it.
Sorry?
The next one. Yeah.
If you go back to the slide with the alignment optical telescope card.
Okay. Let's see if we can do that.
That guard was requested to be built by Gordon Cooper, who I became very friendly with. He wanted a guard over that telescope because he said if they were to damage it with their helmets, they would not be able to get to Earth. And he said he tried very hard to get something designed. And he said, you come up with a lot of crazy things. He said, I'm going to give you the task. It wasn't a written task, just like it was just said. NASA didn't ask for it, he asked for it. So I worked on it for about 2 weeks, and I was sitting on my stoop. And I had purchased, back in the 60s, a push go-kart for my youngest son. And while I was sitting there watching him going up and down the block, I realized that the backrest, if I inverted it, would fit up there as a guard. All I had to do was put a ring around the scope lens and put this all the way up to the ceiling and get it fitted so that structurally it would be sound. Everybody thought that it wouldn't have to have any structural requirements, but the stress people thought otherwise. But what happened was, after I got it set up structurally, it turned out that it became 3 extra handguards for the astronauts when they landed. So Gordon Cooper loved it and was put in every one of the vehicles. But that's how things were done. We would get requests from the astronauts to do things. It wasn't part of the original program.
And guess the kind of trouble he caused. Okay, so let's go on, Larry.
Well, I had worked on a communication system, and some of the items that came up and difficulties during the whole program was we were going to a place where no man had ever gone before. So we were not sure whether certain critical equipment would work. One of them you may recall seeing was what we called the erectable antenna. This looked like a giant umbrella pointed towards the earth. It was used to send communications back to the earth, which was biomedical conditions on the astronauts, the television, and regular voice communications. One of the problems was we were not sure how this could be made and folded up so it was a small unit in the LEM then taken out on the lunar surface and opened up like a giant umbrella. The gravity on the moon is 1/6 that of the Earth. So some of the considerations were we did not want it to be too strong because it would probably fly apart. Another reasons we wanted to make sure that it would work under extreme conditions such as the cold and the vacuum on the moon, being no atmosphere. It proved not to be a problem because it did deploy correctly and that challenge was fulfilled. Another one at the same time was with the TV camera. The first one you knew was black and white. The second one had a problem when they pointed to the sun. Then they eventually went on to color. But the connector that was on the outside of the descent stage, where the astronauts had to go down with the camera and the cable to connect it. Again, we were not sure whether it would work under extreme conditions. So there was much time, many hours, and much money spent trying to make sure that connector did its proper work at the time.
Thank you.
Okay, when I started at Grumman, I was amazed. I was a new engineer, and I was amazed at the excitement and virility that was in the air. I was assigned as a RF engineering, but they assigned me to work in Plant 25, which is still up. It's a big white building on South Oyster Bay Road with a blue Grumman ball. South of it is a red ball, but that says Gold Coast Studios. But anyway, Plant 25 on the 3rd floor, I walked into the building and I was amazed. You saw a room like going into Costco, but maybe the ceiling was only about 40 feet high. And on the far end of the room was a schedule. It was about 40 feet long and maybe about 30 feet wide. And every day, someone would be on a rolling ladder and go up there, as Ray said, and move triangles up or down, up and down. And here it was 1964, and they had a schedule from 1962 to 1969, which showed all the milestones and everything. It was just amazing. And every day he would go up and move the triangles over where he had a little clipboard. But after a while, I started to learn all the acronyms. And the acronyms had acronyms within them. So it took me about 2 or 3 weeks to figure out everything. I would write them in the back of my notebook. And I was working on some analysis on the flight path and communication. But subsequently, I would move down to Plant 14, which is just a half a mile north of Plant 25. And what was nice about that plant, it was a self-contained plant. And I was working for a senior engineer, Ari Keevy, who was from Estonia. And he had a voice like Kissinger. He sounded like a Jackie Mason imitation. But he had this antenna design. It was an X-band antenna. It broadcast at somewhere around 9 gigahertz, and it was all waveguides. And it was like a bifurcated horn. It came up like this, and then it went into 2 splits. But essentially, this antenna provided the communications between the lunar excursion module while it was sitting on the moon and the command service module that went around in orbit. And it was essentially radar data. And it was quite small. I think the length of it was about 12 inches. And it had a little protective, what they call a radome on the top, which was a dielectric surface which was impervious to, it allowed radio waves to go back and forth, but it essentially gave the protection from the atmosphere and from everything else. And I've often looked at pictures of the LEM, but I never exactly figured out where they mounted it because it was such a small, it maybe was about 6 inches wide on the top, like a dimple. And this provided the communications, and essentially what I did, I took measurements in the anechoic chamber, which they had in the Plant 14. And that was a very interesting room. It was a small room, but it had these black pyramidal horns like coming out, pyramids. And it was echo-free. So in other words, you would sit in there and you would hear absolutely nothing. And that's the way it would work, because you could radiate from the antenna and it would not bounce off anything to cause reflections. And we did a number of measurements in there. We checked the patterns. We did what they call standing wave ratios to check how good everything was, if it was matched. And essentially I did the measurements with Ari, and we recorded all the data. And then essentially when we were sure that everything worked, we tweaked things here and there to get the dielectrics inside the waveguides to be okay. Then we documented everything, we put everything down on paper, we sent it to the records department. And from the records department, Grumman in turn sent it to production department. And as I mentioned, there was so much paperwork, you thought that was a lot with that computer girl. They often said that if you got all the paper that went into building the LEM, you could have walked to the moon. But it was a wonderful, wonderful program, and although I was only on it for about 2 years, I then was transferred to the EA-6B aircraft in another plant. But that was the most stimulating project I've been on, with all the excitement that they had.
Thank you.